Chapter 3. The 18th Emergency. Mouse was just starting up the stairs when his mother and Mrs. Casino from across the hall came out of the apartment. "Wait a minute, Benji," his mother said. "Mrs. Casino wants to know if you walk up to Marge's and get Mr. Casino. She'd do it, but she's keeping the baby for Agnes tonight." Mrs. Casino's round face was worried. She was holding her apron up in both hands. "You mind, Benji?" He did mind, and he wanted them to know it. So he sighed and looked down at his feet, at the vent hole in the toe of his shoe. Then he glanced up to the wall. There was a long crack in the wall, and 2 months ago, Mouse had written, "To open building, tear along this line," and he'd drawn an arrow to the crack. He turned his head away. He thought suddenly that Ezzy was right. He probably shouldn't draw these arrows everywhere. "Well," his mother said. "All right." Mouse turned and started down the stairs. His shoulders were hanging. He knew this gave him a dejected look because his mother was always telling him in such a stern way to hold up his shoulders. "You're a good boy, Benji," Miss Casino called, then said loudly to his mother, "You got a good boy there. That one's boy that we don't have to worry about in this world." His mother called to him, "Just go straight there and back, Benji." "All right." "And don't rush Mr. Casino." "He won't rush him," Mrs. Casino said confidently. Mouse went out the door, slamming it behind him and starting up the street. The sun had disappeared in the few minutes he'd been inside, and now the street was darker, colder. Pigeons were going to roost over the grocery store, their wings pale against the dark brick. Mouse zipped up his jacket. A block ahead he could see Ezzy running. Ezzy and his 5 sisters and brother had to be there when Ezzy's father got home from work. It didn't matter what they did during the day, as long as all 7 of them were waiting at the day's end. "Hey, Ezzy! Ezzy turned. "Wait up!" Ezzy pointed to his arm where a watch would have been if he had one. Mouse nodded, waved him on, and then walked slowly up the street on his own. He started thinking again about Marv Hammerman. In his mind, he could see Hammerman exactly as he looked after school that afternoon. Mouse hadn't gotten round to telling Ezzy that. Mouse had come out of school so fast, he'd almost pushed 2 girls down the steps. He wanted only to get home before Hammerman saw him. "Watch it, Benji," the biggest girl, Rebecca, had said, staring at him angrily. "Sorry." And he had run ahead of them a few steps. Then he came to a halt. At the bottom of the steps was Marv Hammerman, waiting. There was something animal-like about Hammerman with his long limbs and careless grace. His clothes that fitted as if he was an extra skin, the shaggy hair that appeared never to have known the pull of a comb. Hammerman had been watching for Mouse. His eyes got a little brighter when he saw him. "Thought you were in such a big hurry," Rebecca said scornfully, nudging him in the back with her books as she passed. Mouse hardly noticed. Hammerman's face was already the way it would have been if he was a man. When Mouse read of boys having to go to work in the coal mines and cotton mills at the age of 12 and 13 in the old days, it did not seem possible until he'd seen Marv Hammerman. Hammerman's face did not change expression when he saw Mouse. It just sharpened a little bit, like a knife. Mouse thought of his own face might have been made of thin rubber. It was a changing expression so rapidly. His face twisted into shock as he saw Hammerman, then into fear, and then quickly awkward. Mouse pantomimed that he'd forgotten something. He turned and ran back into the school, and once inside he had ran through the halls, down the back stairs, out of the side exit, and 25 blocks out of his way just to get home. To take his mind off Hammerman, he tried to think of another of Ezzy's emergencies. These emergencies were the only thing that could make him feel better. Emergency 7. Seizure by a gorilla. If this happens, you relax completely and make soothing noises deep in your throat. Ezzy claimed this was foolproof, but Mouse had never been convinced. "I'll tell you it's a sure thing, Mouse," Ezzy had said. "You make soothing noises, and he lets you go." "Still don't think it'd work." "All right," Ezzy had said. "When a gorilla gets you, you scream and kick and shout. When he gets me, I'm making soothing noises." Ezzy had been sensitive about the success of emergency methods. Emergency 8. Attack by killer whale. This is one of life's most serious emergencies. When this happens, you swim away from the whale as rapidly as possible. Do not try to get swallowed Because, as he says, there isn't much air in the whales as you'd think, so if you do get swallowed by accident, take small measured breaths and try to get coughed out. Then you start swimming away rapidly again. Mouse passed Margie's apartment, and when he was so busy thinking about the killer whale, and then he turned around. He went up the stairs, entered the apartment, and knocked at the first door. When Margie, Mrs. Casino's daughter, opened it, he said, "I came for Mrs. Casino." "Oh, yes." She turned. "Papa, the Forley boy's here for you." She went over and said, "Papa, you ready to go home?" Mr. Casino was staring at the television with eyes that seemed to have pulled back into his head a little. He did not look up. She touched his shoulder. "Papa, you ready to go?" She got him to his feet. He had once been an enormous man, but he was bent over now so that she could pull out his overcoat and button it with ease. "He's ready, Benji." Mouse was waiting at the door, and she had brought Mr. Casino over. She put his hand on Mouse's shoulder, and the two of them went outside and down the stairs. Mr. Casino moved slowly, shifting his weight noticeably with each step, favouring his left leg, rocking back and forth. Mr. Casino had been like this for as long as Mouse could remember, but Mrs. Casino was always talking about the time, before he was ill, when he was the strongest man in the town. He was so strong, she said, that the cry, "Get Mr. Casino!" would bring everyone in the neighbourhood running to see what feat of strength he would do this time. His skill as a furniture mover had been such a legend, she said, that people would stand on the sidewalk like it was a parade to watch Mr. Casino lift armchairs over his head as if they were basketballs. Then came the stroke that would have killed another man. Mr. Casino had lived, but all that was left of his strength was the iron jaw which jutted out from his face. Mouse walked along beside Mr. Casino, keeping his steps in rhythm. He said, "Mr. Casino, some boys are going to kill me." There was no reaction. Miss Casino's huge hand on Mouse's shoulder did not even tighten in sympathy. It made Mouse sad, because he wanted a great reaction. He wanted Mr. Casino's old strength to return. He wanted Mr. Casino to roar with rage, to stretch out his long arms and threaten to pull down whole buildings if those boys were not brought before him. "Did you hear me? Some boys are gonna..." Suddenly, there was a shout behind him. He stopped walking, turned and saw Ezzy running towards him. Ezzy was waving his hands in the air, shouting, "Hammerman! Hammerman!" Mouse said, "Wait a minute, Mr. Casino," in a voice so low it seemed to come from the bottom of a well. "Wait, stop, Mr. Casino!" Mr. Casino walked a few more steps and then stopped. Mouse ran back towards Ezzy, and then Ezzy grabbed his arm and swung them both around with his momentum. "Hammerman's coming!" Ezzy gasped. "What?" Ezzy pointed behind him. "Hammerman's coming!" he said. He panted for breath and he tried to swallow air into his lungs. "He's in front of the newsstand. He in the black sweatshirt. I saw him. They were coming this way and I had to run all the way around to tell you." He gave up trying to speak. He hung his head and gasped. It seemed to Mouse that while Ezzy was having the most terrible trouble getting breath, he, Mouse, had stopped breathing altogether. Actually, the whole world seemed to have stopped. It had ground down to an enormous overworked machine. "In front of the newsstand." "Yeah," Ezzy pointed, jabbing the finger in the air. "Right there." Look, Ez, could you take Mr. Casino home for me? Just walk with him. That's all you have to do. If I run, I could probably get home before Hammond sees me." "I can't, Mouse. I've got to get home myself." Now Ezzy seemed to have stopped breathing too. "Ezzy, listen. My dad'll kill me, Mouse. You know that." Ezzy was not as afraid of his father as he pretended, but he was afraid of Mr. Casino. He had once come upon Mr. Casino unexpectedly on the landing outside the apartment, and in that dark spot, Mr. Casino had seemed, with his huge body and sunken eyes, a terrifying figure. Ezzy had gasped and stood there, flattened against the wall, too frightened to raise his voice above a squeak, too frightened to do anything. Even when Mouse had come out and said, "Oh, that's just Mr. Casino," Ezzy had still been frightened. "Oh, yeah, just Mr. Casino." And he had done a Frankenstein-like imitation of him to cover up his fear. "I've got to go, Mouse. Hurry. You'll get home, Mouse. You can make it." "Ezzy, wait a minute. Look, just if you..." But Ezzy was already running, pointing to his imaginary watch. I've got to go. Ezzy! I got to! Ezzy ran backward for a few steps and then he turned and crossed the street. He waited for a car to pass and then he ran faster. Mouse could see from the way Ezzy was running that he was not going to change his mind. Come on, Mr. Casino. Mouse glanced over his shoulder. The sidewalk was empty. Let's go, Mr. Casino. He turned and looked back again. Let's go! His head was pounding with fear. He could not even swallow. He expected his legs to fold up at any moment like the legs of an old card table. The street was deserted now, and that was another thing that had frightened him. There was no one who could help him. He glanced back over his shoulder again, and then abruptly he felt that he could not bear the suspense any longer. He knew that Hammerman would be coming around the corner at any second, and it was the instinct that comes to the hunted occasionally. He knew that Marv Hammerman was at this moment ready to round the corner of the 4th Street and catch sight of him. Then he would be lost. Miss Casino would be too. Come in here, Miss Casino, quick! Mouse went into the first door he came to and found himself in a dark entrance hall to an apartment building. He put Mr. Casino back against the wall where the mailboxes were. Stand there! He opened the door a crack and looked out. The street was still empty. Mouse waited at the door with hands in his jacket pockets. And he said without looking around, We'll go in a minute, Mr. Casino. This won't take but a minute. He opened the door again, and there was no one in sight, so he opened the door a bit wider. He stuck his head out from time to time. And then, at that moment, Marv Hammerman and the boy in the black sweatshirt came round the corner. Mouse drew back quickly against Mr. Casino, clutching his coat. He felt Mr. Casino's huge body stirring beneath the cloth, and he took his hand. We'll go in a minute. He wondered if Hammerman had seen him look out of the door. If so, all was lost. Mouse reached round Mr. Casino and tried the door that led to the apartments. As he had feared, it was locked. He and Mr. Casino were trapped in this musty, smelly entrance hall. A person could be beaten and left for dead in a hall like this, Mouse thought. No one would even come out of his apartment to see what all the yelling was about. Mr. Casino took a step forwards towards the door. Mouse, no, Mr. Casino, wait a minute! He held Mr. Casino's arm with both hands and drew him back against the mailboxes. Mr. Casino remained beside him for a moment and then made a movement towards the door again. Mr. Casino, just a minute! Mouse dared not lean forward and look out the door for fear of Hammerman spotting him. We'll be all right, Mr. Casino. Don't worry. We're going. Just 1 minute. Mr. Casino's overcoat smelled of dry tobacco, even though he had not used his pipe for many years. Now, it was a smell that Mouse associated with his own dad. He lost the smell suddenly in the musty odour of the cold hall, and he put his face against the overcoat. Mr. Casino started towards the door again. No, not yet, Mr. Casino, please. He held his arm, trying to draw him back. This time, Mr. Casino was determined, and there was no stopping him. Please, Mr. Casino, please. He remembered Mrs. Casino telling him about a time during their courtship where 10 men had tried to keep Mr. Casino from entering a dance hall where she was doing the polka. Mr. Casino had toppled all 10 men as easily as if they'd been bowling pins. Mr. Casino pushed open the door and started out. Mouse hesitated. He remained against the wall. He was sick. He thought that he shouldn't have eaten those beans for supper. Even 4 lima beans could be such a terrible burden in his stomach under conditions like this. He swallowed, and he waited a minute more in the dark hall. He pressed his face against the cold metal mailboxes to see if that would keep him from being sick. Then, in a rush, he tore himself away from the wall and went out of the door after Mr. Casino. As he came for the door, he had a moment of dizziness. It was as if he had just stepped off one of those rides in the amusement park that Ezzy was so fond of and that made Mouse sick. You win your money's worth, don't you? Ezzy had said to Mouse. Mouse wished that Ezzy was there to stumble around with him, moaning about the pleasure of his dizziness. Where am I, Mouse? Where am I? The world was spinning so rapidly that for a minute, Mouse couldn't see anything. Marv Hammerman could have been right in front of him, and Mouse wouldn't have even known. He held onto the banister, leaning on it, and then suddenly everything cleared. Mouse looked up the street, down the street, and there was Garbage Dog coming towards him with the old Lorna Dooney cookie box in his mouth. He looked the other way, and there was Mr. Casino making his way back to Margie's. In the distance were 2 strange boys walking along with a basketball. bouncing it back and forth between them. Marv Hammerman was nowhere in sight, and with almost a sickening sense of relief, Mouse knew that Hammerman had not seen him and had gone on across the street and up forth to where he lived. "Mr. Casino, wait a minute! That's the wrong way! Wait, Mr. Casino!" He ran after Mr. Casino and caught up with him just as the two boys stopped bouncing the ball. "This way," Mouse said. He turned him around, and with the same slow rocking steps, they started for home. "We'll be all right now." That is chapter 3 of the 18th Emergency. Apologies if you could hear any background noise. Again, the neighbours are doing some construction. So chapter 3 is there. Chapter 4 will be released tomorrow. Okay, so make sure you listen to that if you need to listen to it again.